Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon and please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with tonight's second half, shall we? Tonight's first experience. This happened back in March, but some other crazy stuff has been happening with animals, such as possible coyotes and cougars. So in March, my friend and I decided to have a fire. Since we're in Maryland, it's still really cold around that time. We invited 2 other friends to come over and join us. Side note, we normally have a stock of chicken livers to feed the fox around here, and we put them outside my friend's window to watch the fox eat them. So while we were talking around the fire and drinking some brews, I had a grand idea of taking the rest of the chicken liver and putting them behind the detached garage in the woods. There's a game camera, so the plan was to put the livers in front of it to see whatever animal was lurking deeper in the woods. So I grabbed the liver, I grabbed my friend, and we go down the 250 to 300 foot driveway. It's about 11 p.m., so we have our phone flashlights on. We get down behind the garage, and I heard walking in the woods. I told my friend to shut up and listen. He said he didn't hear anything. We take a few more steps, and he finally hears it. We stop again and listen, and there's nothing. We're about 10 to 15 feet from the tree line, and I take one step, see movement off to my right slightly, and shine my phone light over there. There's a white face looking at us from behind a fallen tree. But I don't pay much attention to it because I was drinking. Then it starts running back and forth in front of us, right within the tree line. It's so fast and the movement seemed so odd, but yet graceful for its height and speed. We're panicking, trying to get our lights on, and after about 10 seconds of this, both of our lights hit it, and it stops dead in its tracks. It was somewhere from 6 to 7 feet tall, super skinny. I could see its tendons and its arms and legs, super long arms that came past its knees. Obviously long legs as well. It was running on 2 feet, and it stopped in a weird position, not facing us, yet its head was turned toward us. It didn't really have any facial features, nothing in its eye sockets that I could see. Our phone lights reflected off its pale skin. It seemed like we'd sat there staring at each other for minutes. I eventually screamed and ran so fast and left my friend behind. He eventually followed suit and was running behind me. Of course, when I was running, I tripped and fell. But I just sat there listening, and I didn't hear anything, so I thought we were in the clear. My friend did say he thought he heard it running beside us in the woods while we were running back up the driveway. I had no idea what it was and felt absolutely crazy until my friend kept reassuring me he saw it as well. Throughout the night, we kept hearing walking in the woods, and we got very nervous. Nothing crazy happened in the woods since. Until a couple nights ago, my friend and I decided to have another fire since, well, summer's in the air. And it was just the 2 of us this time. We heard a weird animal that was later established as a screech owl near the bamboo in the front of the woods. We also heard what sounded like a dog being beaten or attacked from the neighbors across the street's property. They don't have any dogs. Then finally, around 1 a.m., the fire was starting to die down. Across the street again, we heard this terrifying screeching noise. I can only describe it as tires squealing and then a human yelling at the same time. We immediately put the fire out and went inside through the side door. As we were opening the screen door, something was running up the side of the house towards us very fast. I wish I had had the courage to peek my head around the corner. We had the window cracked that night listening for noises, and we kept hearing weird screeching noises throughout the night. Tonight's second encounter. This experience happened during my teenage years, probably 15 or 16 years old. I lived in a small town of 2,000 people, mainly surrounded by boreal forest. In a region of Quebec, Canada. Now, this place was great, as we often saw deer and other wildlife. It was usually a quiet and safe place. To put a bit of context, my house was located at the side of a dead end, and only had a light source at night was my house. There was a single street light at the end of the road, but it only lit up part of the street and the forest behind it. Now, we were dog people. I only had small dogs while living there. Every day we needed to let them out to pee, as all dogs do, but at night they were almost impossible to see because of the darkness. Our terrain was kind of big and the light source was weak. I was a gamer at that time and often stayed up late. So I was the one who needed to take them out to go to the bathroom at 2 a.m. because it stayed with me while I was playing. One night, I opened the door and waited for my dog to do his thing while trying to look at it. I was only able to see the reflection of the light in his eyes when he looked at me. I started to look around because sometimes the deer were sleeping in the woods under the streetlight or wild turkey roaming around when a little dark spot caught my attention. It looked like a human head coming out of the brush, but I wasn't able to see it because it was a bit dark. I didn't want my dog to run after whatever it was. My dog had the tendency to run away after wild animals, so I called him. He, of course, didn't listen to me, but the thing in the brush started to crawl toward the street slowly. It looked like a human, with thin limbs but a normal body and a slightly long neck. I started to freak out a bit and shook the treat cup so my dog would hurry up. He came running inside and I shut the door as fast as I could. I shut the lights off in the house so I could have a view of what was outside. The strange creature crawled fast, almost running like a dog, with every limb broken. As an improvised crawling movement, the animal passed under the light, where I saw it had no fur. Like a shaved animal, it was disgusting. I was afraid and standing in the dark. The animal ran toward the light and continued on the street, where I wasn't able to see it because the houses in my neighborhood were surrounded by trees. I locked the door and went to sleep with my dog. I didn't tell anybody about it. A couple of months later, I went to bed kind of early, maybe 11 p.m., and was watching some videos on my phone. They were gaming videos. I had my headphones on. The sound on the video was reoccurring, and I thought it was very annoying, like a distant, weird scream. After a couple of minutes, the video finished, and I went to watch another. But during the loading, the sound occurred again. I took my headphones off and waited for the sound. I heard it and immediately had tears in my eyes. It was coming from my window. My room is on the second floor, so I looked down into the forest to see if there was any movement. The only light near the forest entrance was the moonlight and an underwater light in our pool that emitted a small halo around it. I wasn't able to see anything, but the sound occurred again. It was a mix between a distorted scream and a pig having its throat cut, or a strong pain whining from a dog. I looked down and saw an animal that passed so fast it was really hard to see. But I barely saw a human-sized animal with thin limbs crawling like a spider. It wasn't running after anything. The sound occurred another time. It was the most horrible thing I had ever heard. I closed my window to choke a bit of the sound out. I heard it again 3 other times, and it stopped after that. I talked to my dad about the sound, and he told me it was probably a deer being attacked by a wild animal. I was really scared of it. I barely walked in the woods at night the 3 following years before moving to the city to go to university. To this day, I have never heard an animal like it, and it really made me question my mental health at the time, because I had PTSD from a dog attack in middle school. I had sometimes light hallucinations when I gamed for too long, like black shadows that disappear immediately, or things like that. There were barely any reports of wolves, coyotes, or bear in my area, and believe me, I made a lot of discoveries exploring the forest in this town. Tonight's third experience. So, my first encounter is actually an old friend of mine's, who I hadn't seen or spoken to in some years, but I still remember this very vividly to this day. It was 1996, and I had just turned 22. I was at a party with a few friends, and the host of the party was the daughter of some wealthy family. She was a bit of a spoiled brat from what I remember, and her parents had this really amazing house, which I remember having this pretty awesome chandelier at the entrance and one of the highest ceilings I had ever seen. Anyway, the house was in solitude and was the only house around for some distance. To get to it, you had to drive a minute or two along this really long road that was not lit up at all. The house was surrounded by a lot of forest, but had a small lake nearby. Now the party had been going on for a good few hours, and a buddy of mine was showing up pretty late because of work or something. I have no idea why, because it was years ago, but I know he showed up fairly late. I remember being in the kitchen talking to someone, and he comes bursting into the room fully out of breath and immediately comes to me and interrupts my conversation. He was extremely hysterical, and I remember telling him to calm down and breathe. He then began to say that his dad dropped him off on the start of where the longish road began, as his dad was in a hurry. I remember thinking why the hell his dad would let him walk across a dark forest road to a secluded house at night on his own was sensible, but hey, who am I to judge someone else's family? My friend was saying he was walking up the road about halfway, drinking his cans, when he heard a sort of growl behind him. Thinking he was about to get attacked by a wolf or whatever, he began to walk much faster. And it wasn't until he turned around, and about 10 feet from him, at the tree, was this hunched-over creature. I remember him constantly calling it this tall white thing. He said it had a huge head and gaping mouth. He let out a scream and then ran as quick as he could to the house. He made it to the house and busted in without looking back, which he then immediately found me. Now at the time, and for years after, I personally just thought he saw an animal and his imagination went wild. I think people for years would just go, yeah, dude, whatever, when he would bring it up. But he never let anyone get to his head, and he was always defensive over what he saw. Now on to my experience and why I now believe my friend. I was camping with my wife and daughter in Minnesota last year at the beginning of July. For summer, the campsite we were at was pretty quiet, but there were a few families near our tents. It's next to the river and it's covered by thick forest. Now, the opening of our tent faced north toward the river. It was a truly awesome view coming out of our tent. It was close to sunset, but it was still fairly light, enough to see across the river clearly. I remember specifically saying to my wife that I needed the lighter to start the stove to boil some water for dinner. Now I remember setting up the stove, and as I looked up to get a glimpse of the river, something caught my eye. There was this thing walking through the forest on the other side of the river. It was incredibly tall, and its limbs were very skinny. It didn't seem to look in my direction until someone from another family by our campsite shouted. Not about the thing across the river, just about something else. That shout made it look over in my direction, and I still remember its pale, bulbous head looking straight at me across the river. It then hunched over on all fours and began to crawl away at an incredible speed into the opposite direction. I didn't sleep at all that night. I didn't tell my wife or daughter because I didn't want to terrify my daughter, because I knew it would freak her out. The next day we were supposed to stay another night, but I didn't let that happen. My wife asked why, and I let her know what I saw, and she knew I was not lying. Trust me, she would know if I was. That creature still gives me the creeps to this day. It's actually giving me a few sleepless nights. But finding out how many people have seen exactly what I have has helped me a little bit. Tonight's fourth encounter. I'm not sure what's really going on. Just looking for some guidance. I live in the suburbs of Arizona, right by a mountain preserve. There are plenty of washes around. We get coyotes, bobcats, raccoons, the usual. We have plenty of chickens and 5 dogs, a wolf dog, a big male Akita, and Anatolian shepherds, 3 of them. 2 are male puppies, though. The dogs are inside, but we let them into the yard and they free roam. We have a 6-foot wall around a large yard. We have neighbors on all 3 sides of the wall. One of the houses to the side is vacant, and the one directly behind us, the owner, hasn't been home for about a month. On both sides of the house is a wash. About a week ago at dusk, my sister had called for the dogs to come in. She saw one of the pups walking away from her and into some of the brush, slightly out of view, and called to it. I asked her what she was doing, and she said, "The pup." I said, "No, he's right here," which he was. All the dogs were accounted for. We just brushed it off as strange and didn't think much of it. Last night at 12:30 at night, my dad and I were awake in the family room. We hear a large bang outside, which sounds like the trash can lid is closing. So we send out the Akita and grab our lights and head outside. We check the trash cans. Nothing's disturbed as far as we can tell. I notice my sister has come to the door because she heard the bang too. I head back to tell her when my dad pops his head in and asks if we let the pups out. I said no. And then he gets mad and responds, "He's right here outside." The Akita we left outside is standing next to my dad. Our 4 other dogs are lying right inside. We watch what is not our pup, but looks like his backside walk behind the greenhouse and out of sight. The same dog my sister had seen the other day, same size, same color, same curly tail. Both times we only saw his backside. There's no chance this breed is running wild in Arizona. That pup has also recently gotten a scar across his muzzle, but we thought it was from the other dogs picking on him more than usual. He's also the only dog that barks at his reflection at night in the windows. Our dogs usually run around the yard day or night playing. In the past few days, they have been hanging around the door while they are outside, or around us when we go outside. They have been uncomfortable recently, which is weird for them. The 5 together in the yard fear nothing. The smallest are literally the 2 male puppies weighing 70 pounds each. What we saw looked exactly like one. At least, what we saw was his backside. We didn't follow because of everything I've read on the internet. And not knowing what it was, I wasn't about to take a chance without some guidance. There is no chance this is a wild dog hopping over our 6-foot wall. There are no wild Anatolian shepherds in the area. It's more of a rare breed. Also, usually we don't hear other dogs barking at night. We've heard more than ever recently. Only on days that we have not seen this dog. Little update, from dusk till dawn, one of us goes out and walks with the dogs. We also bought a new, stronger flashlight that lights up the area pretty nicely. We have cut and cleaned out a lot of the brush, so there's less hiding spots. However, when we walk the dogs at night, they do their business and head back to the door even before we do. I've never known them to do that. They always want to be outside. We haven't seen anything since the 2 sightings, although it's only been a few days. We have heard on 2 different nights a large pack of coyotes in the neighborhood, and even heard they got 2 neighborhood dogs. And when I say hear, I mean it's 1 in the a.m. and we hear them howling and fighting, and the losing side. The coyotes are not the ones making the dogs uncomfortable. We had one jump the wall in the past, and all our dogs went after it. it couldn't get back over fast enough. So I'm still concerned because they aren't comfortable again, and I'm not sure why. Tonight's final experience. So me and my two buddies were up at Lone Peak Canyon in Utah with our plan to sleep under the stars and leave the next day. So we got everything set and decided to go to the lake and swim. On our way back, we saw a single deer with an abnormally large ears and eyes, and it had odd proportions in general. I've grown up in Utah Valley my whole life, and I've seen thousands of deer, so I know what they usually look and act like. The deer was sitting on a rock like a dog, and it turned its head to watch us without giving any reaction. Its head seemed to turn and follow, while its body stayed perfectly still. It almost looked like its head was detached from its body. I decided that it was just an odd occurrence, and that I should just ignore it. It was about 4 p.m., about 30 minutes later, while we were at our campsite. We saw that same deer chasing another, but it stopped and continued to look up at us for maybe 5 minutes. When we all looked away, it almost just disappeared. Maybe it took off as soon as we looked away, but it was also odd. 30 minutes after that, we saw the same deer probably 200 yards away, up on the side of the hill overlooking us. It stayed there for at least 45 minutes, just staring at us. The fourth time we saw it, it was later, 9:30, when we were in our sleeping bags getting ready for bed. The deer came up over the river that we were next to, probably 20 feet away, and just looked at us again for maybe 2 minutes and then went back down. Same thing happened again in the same spot 15 minutes later. It almost seemed to be checking if we had gone to sleep yet. It continued to check on us one more time 15 minutes again later. At this point, I'm freaked out, but didn't want to say anything because I was afraid my friends would say I was imagining things. We all tried to go to bed, and at about 10:30, 10:45, we started hearing something maybe 10 feet away, just under the hill that led to where the river was. We continued to hear what sounded like a deer walking in the river and coming to check on us. Every time it would get close, we would start talking and shining our lights into the trees to see if we could see anything. This happened enough to the point that we just grabbed everything and left at midnight. On our way down, my buddies said they kept seeing silhouettes off to our sides. The entire way down, we kept seeing weird things, like a deer next to the road staring at the mountainside at literally nothing, not moving or reacting or grazing. We continued to see more and more deer that were behaving oddly. But remember that we have all seen thousands of deer just up that canyon itself, and they have never behaved like this, ever. Well, there you have it, folks. An upload just on crawlers. Dogmen are scary. Bigfoot are scary. Crawlers are out there as well, and they are scary also. I think people need to realize that, yes, dogmen are very interesting, but unfortunately there are things out there that are just as sinister. I hope you all enjoyed tonight's second half as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. With that, I'd like to thank you for being the base, the foundation of this platform. Your support has built this channel to where it is. Thank you so much. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, watching your children, your pets, your loved ones. These creatures are real. They are out there and they are dangerous. No matter what anybody says. Bigfoot, Dogman, they're not friendly. Crawlers aren't friendly. They're a wild animal. Hopefully. Would you go up and offer some tobacco to a bear? No. Say a prayer to a bear? No. These things are, even if they don't come out of portals and they don't have any kind of religious aspect, They're wild animals. You need to be prepared. You need to have protection while you're in the woods. Yes, the armor of the Lord is great, but it's not going to protect you if these things are honestly flesh and blood. You think a Dogman or a crawler or a Bigfoot running full bore at you is going to stop because you're saying the Our Father? No. It may help, but both together, prayer and a sidearm or a rifle, you got yourself a winning combo there, don't you? God bless you all.